Hello friends, welcome. Here we are discussing real stories told by real people. Today we have a story about a man who found out the shocking truth about her at a party with his wife. Let's see what happens. My name is Dexter. I'm 42 years old. I am of medium height with dark hair already starting to turn gray at the temples. His eyes are brown and his face is slightly lined. They say that I always look focused and serious. I work in IT, which leaves its mark on my daily behavior and appearance, strict suits, a minimum of emotions. My wife, Raven, 35 years old, was the exact opposite of me. Tall, slender, with long blonde hair and green eyes. She was the soul of the company, always smiling, bright and energetic. Raven worked in marketing and loved talking to people. We had been married for 10 years and seemed to be living happily ever after. That evening, when Raven insisted on hosting a game night at our house, I sensed something was amiss. She never liked being a hostess. "It's going to be fun," she said with a sly smile. "It's been so long since we've all been together." Our friends started coming around 7 in the evening. Among them were Blake and Tiffany, Marcus and Casey, and finally Derek and Jane. Blake was tall, athletic, with short black hair. His wife, Tiffany, is a small and fragile blonde with blue eyes. Marcus was overweight and always joking, and Casey, his wife, always looked stylish and well-groomed. Derek was quiet and thoughtful, with dark hair, and his wife Jane was a sweet brunette with a soft voice. We opened several bottles of wine and started the evening with light snacks and chatting. "What's on the agenda?" Blake asked, leaning back on the couch with a glass of Cabernet. Raven smiled mysteriously. "I think we could play Never," she said, taking the cards out of the box. I should have stopped her right away, but I didn't want to be a bore. Besides, how bad can it be? We're all friends, right? The first few rounds were harmless. We confessed to forgetting to honk when turning around or stealing towels from the hotel. Laughter and jokes filled the room. But then Raven pulled out a card that changed everything. "I have never cheated on my spouse," she read aloud. The room froze. Raven lifted the glass to her lips and took a sip. There was a strange mix of defiance and guilt in her eyes. I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. "Honey, what the hell?" I choked out, trying to laugh. "You're kidding, right?" Raven just shrugged and hiccuped from the alcohol. "Oh, I think I forgot about that." The others exchanged awkward glances. Realizing the tension that had arisen, Blake tried to defuse the situation. "Well, I think we've all made mistakes at some point," he said, but his joke didn't work. The game soon ended, and our friends hurried away. When I was alone, I looked at Raven. "What was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "I was just kidding, Dex," she waved off, heading for the bedroom. "You know how much I love to tease you." But I wasn't sure about that anymore. The next morning, when Raven came out of the bedroom holding her head after a hangover, I decided to talk to her seriously. "Were you serious yesterday? Were you with someone else?" She looked at me defiantly. "Are you kidding me? After all these years, are you starting to distrust me because of a stupid game?" "I just want to understand, Raven," I said, trying to stay calm. "Save your suspicions, Dexter. I was drunk and acting like an idiot, that's all." The end of the story. She turned around and left. Maybe she was right. Maybe I really overdid it. But something heavy and bitter stuck in my stomach and wouldn't go away. Over the next few weeks, I began to notice things I hadn't noticed before. Late returns from work, quiet phone conversations, how Raven was becoming more distant and evasive. The next morning, when Raven came out of the bedroom, I noticed that she looked tired. She was holding her head, suffering from a hangover. Her long blonde hair was disheveled, and her green eyes were red from lack of sleep. At that moment, she looked fragile and vulnerable. I looked at her and felt doubt growing inside me. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound neutral. "How are you feeling?" Raven sighed and reached for a glass of water. "It's terrible. I will never drink so much again," she muttered, sitting down at the table. Her face was pale, and she avoided my gaze. I decided not to postpone the conversation. "Raven, I need to ask you something. Last night, were you really joking?" She looked up at me with annoyance in her eyes. "Are you serious, Dix? Do you want to talk about it now?" "Yes, I do," I replied firmly. Raven sighed and rubbed her temples. "Okay, ask away. You said you cheated on me. Was it a joke or something more?" She looked at me defiantly. "Do you really think I could cheat on you?" "What is it?" she asked, her voice turning cold. I felt my heart constrict in my chest. "I just want to know the truth." Raven shook her head. "You're being paranoid. I was drunk and I said something stupid. That's all." Her words didn't calm me down. Over the following weeks, the doubt continued to grow. I started noticing things that seemed insignificant before. Raven was often late at work. Her phone conversations became quieter and shorter. She began to avoid intimacy and increasingly went to her friends. One evening, when Raven was late at work again, I noticed her phone blinking on the nightstand. I picked it up and saw an unread message from an unknown number. "See you tomorrow at the usual place. I miss you." My heart stopped beating. I knew I shouldn't have done it, but I entered her password and unlocked the phone. A screenshot of the screen showed endless correspondence with someone named Jaden. The messages were full of flirting, ambiguous comments, and plans for a meeting. I felt the ground slipping away from under my feet. When Raven returned home, I was sitting on the couch, holding her phone in my hands. She entered the living room, her face lit up with surprise and then fear. "What are you doing with my phone?" "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Who is Jaden?" I asked coldly, looking straight into her eyes. Raven froze, her eyes wide with horror. "It's not what you think, Dex," she began, but I wasn't listening anymore. "I need to know the truth, Raven. Did you cheat on me with him?" I asked, my voice breaking. She shook her head slowly, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "Dex, I can explain everything." But I already knew that the words were empty. The doubt sound that night has sprouted and become a reality. In the evening, when Raven was late at work again, I sat in the silence of our bedroom. Thoughts whirled in my head. I couldn't stand this state of suspense any longer. An inner voice whispered that it was time to act. When I heard the sound of the shower, my heart sank. Raven probably didn't notice that her phone was still on the nightstand. With trembling hands, I took it and entered the password. The screen unlocked and I opened the message app. There was all the evidence of her infidelity. Correspondence with Jaden was full of flirting, ambiguous comments, and explicit plans for a meeting. "I'll see you soon. I can't wait to meet you," one of the messages read. I felt my blood freeze in my veins. It wasn't just a friendship. It was a betrayal. I quickly took screenshots of all the messages. My heart was beating so loudly that it seemed to be audible throughout the apartment. When I was done, I put the phone back in its place and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process what I had just learned. The bathroom door opened and Raven came out, drying her hair with a towel. Her face was fresh, her eyes glistened from the warmth of the shower. She noticed my tense state and frowned. "What's wrong, Dex?" she asked, coming closer. Her green eyes searched mine. I raised my head and looked at her, feeling anger and pain wash over me. "Raven, who is Jaden?" I asked coldly. Her eyes widened and she froze. "What are you talking about?" "What is it?" she asked nervously, trying to remain calm. "I found your messages," I said, holding her phone in my hands. "Did you cheat on me?" Raven turned pale. Dex, it's not what you think, she began, her voice trembling. Then what is it? I asked without taking my eyes off her. Explain to me, what does "I can't wait to meet you" mean? She lowered her eyes, tears began to gather on her eyelashes. We were just talking, nothing serious, she whispered. Just talking? I asked sarcastically. You call this just a conversation? Raven shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. Dex, please let me explain. Explain? I exclaimed. What's there to explain? You betrayed me. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry. I'm sorry, Dex. I didn't want this to happen. I'm confused. Looked at her, feeling anger give way to devastation. Why? I asked quietly. Raven raised her head, her face wet with tears. I don't know. I was unhappy, looking for something new, something that could fill the void. I turned away, unable to look at her. I thought we were happy, I said, my voice breaking. I thought so too, she whispered. But something has changed. I can't explain it. We stood in silence, realizing that our marriage would never be the same. I was sitting in our bedroom, holding Raven's phone in my hands. My heart was beating so loudly that it seemed you could hear it all over the apartment. I knew I had to do something. An inner voice whispered, "It's time to act." Raven came out of the bathroom, her long blonde hair wet and her green eyes glistening from the warmth of the shower. She smiled when she saw me, but when she noticed the phone in my hands, she became alert. "Dexter, what are you doing?" "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. She came closer, drying her hair with a towel. "Raven, we're having a serious conversation," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Who is Jaden?" She froze, her eyes wide with fear. "What do you mean?" She tried to dodge. "I've seen your messages," I continued. "You betrayed me." Raven paled. "It's not what you think, Dex," she began, trying to look calm. "Not that," I asked bitterly. "You flirted with him, dated behind my back. How can you say that this is not the case?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered, lowering her head. I looked at her, feeling anger turn to disappointment. "You lied to me," I said softly. "Every time you said you were late at work." Raven covered her face with her hands and started crying. "Dexter, I'm confused. I was unhappy." "Unhappy?" I asked, not believing my ears. "We were married for 10 years. How could you do that?" She raised her head, her face wet with tears. "I don't know. I was looking for something new, something that could fill the void." I got up, unable to sit anymore. "You ruined our marriage," I said, trying not to scream. "I thought we were happy." Raven tried to approach me, but I backed away. "Please, Dex, give me a chance to explain myself." "No," I replied sharply. "You lost this chance when you betrayed me." She started crying again, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "What should we do now? What is it?" she asked through her tears. I sighed, feeling a weight fall on me. "I do not know," I said, "but I can't keep living like this." Raven slowly shook her head. "Please don't do this. We can fix everything." I looked at her and felt my heart constrict. "No, Raven," I said firmly. "We can't. You ruined what we had." "I want a divorce." Her face paled even more. "Dexter, please," she begged. "Don't do this. Give me a chance to fix it." "But I've already made up my mind." "No," I repeated. "I can't live a lie anymore." Raven covered her face with her hands and burst into tears again. I stood in front of her, feeling my heart being torn apart. But I knew it was the only right way. After my conversation with Raven, the silence in the house became unbearable. We avoided each other like two ghosts wandering through an empty house. I felt that I could no longer tolerate her presence, and decided to act. One evening, when Raven went to visit a friend, I sat down at my computer and started planning my revenge. I thought about her job at a marketing firm and realized that this could be the key to my plan. I opened her social media and started looking for information that could help me. When Raven returned, I already knew what to do. She entered the house, her long blonde hair disheveled by the wind. She looked tired. Her green eyes were full of sadness and fatigue. She noticed my gaze and froze. "What are you up to, Dexter?" "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling with tension. "I can't live like this anymore, Raven," I said, trying to sound calm. "You ruined our marriage, and I want everyone to know about it." Her face paled. "You can't do this," she whispered. "It will ruin my career." "You did it yourself," I replied coldly. "Now it's time to pay for your actions." She tried to approach me, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Don't," I said. "You've made your choice, and now I'm going to make mine." The next day, I went to Raven's office. I knew that her boss, Mr. Wilson, was always strict and demanding. I went up to his secretary and asked for a meeting. "Mr. Wilson, I have important information," I said when I entered his office. He frowned and motioned for me to sit down. "What kind of information?" I posted printed screenshots of the messages in front of him. "She cheated on me with one of her colleagues. Here's the evidence." Mr. Wilson looked at the papers carefully, his face becoming more and more serious. "These are serious allegations," he said. "Are you sure of their authenticity?" "Absolutely," I replied. "I just want justice to be served." He nodded, his eyes glistening with tension. "We will conduct an investigation. Thank you for bringing this." When I left the office, I felt light, but also empty. My revenge began, but it did not bring joy. A few days later, Raven returned home, her face distorted with anger and tears. "You ruined everything," she screamed, throwing her bag on the floor. I was fired. I looked at her, feeling anger and frustration boiling inside. "You ruined our lives yourself," I said softly. Raven collapsed to her knees, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "What should we do now?" "What is it?" she asked through her tears. I sighed, realizing that this path would only lead us to more destruction. "I do not know," I said, "but I can't live like this anymore. We have to break up." She raised her head, her eyes full of pain. "Please, Dexter, give me a chance to fix this." "No," I said firmly. "It's too late." In the following weeks, our relationship finally broke down. We filed for divorce, and the process was painful and protracted. We shared property, argued about small things, and tested each other's strength. One day, I decided that I had to finish what I had started. I found the contact of Jaden's wife. Her name was Linda. I sent her all the screenshots of Raven and Jaden's correspondence. A few days later, Linda contacted me. Her voice trembled with anger and disappointment. "Thank you for telling me the truth," she said. "I'm filing for divorce." I felt my heart constrict. My revenge was complete, but it did not bring satisfaction. Raven and I broke up, and each of us started a new path full of pain and awareness. So we have come to the end of this story. Please write your opinion in the comments. We will be interested to know it. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss new, even more exciting stories. We wish you good luck.